Meeting. This is a meeting of the Council held in public. It is not a public meeting. There is no fire drill planned this evening, so if the alarm sounds, please leave by the exit nearest the large screen at the front of the room and proceed down the fire exit to the courtyard. Once it is safe to return, councillors will receive a text message and officers will also advise when it is safe to return to the meeting. We are recording the meeting this evening using our webcasting system, and the webcast will be transmitted live and will also be available on the Council's website following the meeting. All mobile devices should be switched off or set to silent so that the meeting is not interrupted by ringtones. Okay, that's the housekeeping done. We'll go to the agenda, and item 1 is apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chairman. An apology received from Councillor Hollyman.
Anyone else? No? Okay, thank you. Item 2 on page 3 is any declarations of interest from members. Just the Essex one. Yeah, okay, thank you. Item number 3 is the minutes on page 5 to 14. If you were here, all those in favour of those minutes? Again, abstentions? Okay, that's fine, thank you very much. Item 4 is the minutes of the subcommittees on page 15 to 20. This is just to note the minutes of the miscellaneous licensing subcommittee meetings which were held on the 10th of January. Item 5 is the out of area private hire operators update. To Rachel.
Thank you, Chairman. So I think we've had a number of discussions recently and in previous years as well in relation to the ongoing challenges for a number of out-of-area operators that work in the Basildon Borough, not just the Basildon Borough but across Essex and the wider country. This is a national issue, but clearly it affects some of our Basildon drivers. So the idea is just to provide a brief report for members on the current position, and also provides an overview of where we're currently at, but also to seek members' approval of lobbying of members of Parliament in relation to moving forward on legislative changes, if I could say that word. So reports have previously been brought before members of the Licensing Committee in both 2019 and 2020, and a number of actions were taken at that time which are set out within the body of the report. Unfortunately, as you can imagine, COVID set in at that point, and so generally I think everybody's minds were focused on other things at that time, including the MPs, and we didn't get the meeting that we were requesting at that time. Just to highlight in the body of the report a number of the challenges in terms of the out-of-town operators. There were changes implemented under the Deregulation Act which allowed private hire operators to subcontract to other private hire operators across local authority boundaries. The greater use of the cloud-based apps, which is giving customers greater flexibility. The large cloud-based operator platforms, which I won't name in this tonight in the meeting, and differences in fee levels. So we know, for example, and I haven't mentioned, there's a particular local authority in the Midlands that are responsible for licensing a significant number of the drivers and operators at national level now, which is creating a real challenge, and they operate all over the country, as do Transport for London licensed drivers and operators. As of June 2023, just for information, the Transport for London website suggests that around 340 drivers living in the Basildon Borough held a private hire driver licence with Transport for London. I don't think we can make an assumption that that means therefore they're working in Basildon. They could be working anywhere, but that's a significant proportion of, or a significant number of drivers, and that's probably about equal to the number of drivers we have licensed with Basildon currently. So in 2019, a number of letters were sent on behalf of the Chair of the Licensing Committee, including to operators known to be working in the borough, asking them to withdraw from Basildon, to the Mayor of London for Transport for London in regard to their licensing standards and the impacts on other local licensing authorities, and to the 3 members of Parliament at the time requesting a meeting between the members of the Licensing Committee, members of Parliament and trade representatives with a view to discussing the issue of out-of-town operators with regard to public safety. This last action was not successfully discharged due to difficulties in agreeing a suitable date and time for all parties at a time, which also coincided with the COVID restrictions which came into effect at that time. Since then, I think we've been anticipating the changes in the legislation which have been promised for some time, the updating of the legislation. Taxi licensing figured in the Queen's speech in 2022, and nothing more has materialised apart from the Department of Transport changed statutory guidance and more recent best practice guidance. Work has continued in relation to getting the cross-border authorisations in place, not least as a result of the efforts being put in by Alex next to me. And we continue to investigate all complaints about out-of-area vehicles. And to just give an overview for 23-24, we've investigated 30 complaints for each one. All complaints being followed up with the relevant operators and the local authorities, and all had pre-bookings in place. The licensing authorities have been informed about any illegal stopping on ranks, and the drivers involved have been issued warning letters as well. So I think really it's just an opportunity for members to have a bit of a discussion, to ask questions. We won't necessarily have the answers, but equally to seek the option of being able to lobby the MPs in relation to, again, further lobbying with Parliament to move some of these changes forward. We've been waiting since 2014, I think, was the review originally, and it's just rumbling on and on. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, I mean, there was some changes, but it was watered down, wasn't it? We were expecting some major changes, but it was all hardly anything in the legislation bill. Members, anyone got any comments to make? Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. No, I'd just like to say I think it's incredulous, reading this report, that we're still stuck in this situation, really. Something obviously needs to be done, and as quickly as possible. Obviously, the whole thing seems to undermine really what we're trying to do as a committee, the safety of residents and those in particular who seek obviously the car hire within the borough. I think really the main question really is around what is this action we're kind of be doing, what kind of form will it take, in the form of lobbying members of Parliament, which I think obviously needs to be done to affect the necessary legislation that is needed in place. Is there anything that is planned on the back of the discussions this evening, and presumably assuming that we are going to be passing the recommendation?
Thank you, Councillor Webb. I think from our perspective at the moment, I think we were wanting to kickstart the discussions again that we initially instigated and then paused because of COVID, and then subsequently because we were expecting the legislation to change. I think it was a question of expressing frustration, and as you've mentioned, the fact that it's undermining the standards that we're trying to maintain here at Basildon, and that licensing committee members have actually voted to maintain in Basildon. So I think we would certainly start with a letter to the MPs from the Chairman of Licensing in terms of setting out some of the issues of concern that we have, and actually now is the time. Whilst the statutory guidance has been helpful and the best practice guidance is helpful, it doesn't deal with this as a fundamental issue, and I think that's the concern that we're trying to highlight.
Councillor Headley.
Just for clarity, Chairman, if I just test that I've got the right understanding, you're saying that these licences are being issued by other authorities to operate, and one of the authorities is in the Midlands, did you say? So, whilst I don't want to lead you to give me the answer, it would appear that that authority is licensing taxes that they know won't work in their area. So they're using this as a method of providing income at no cost to themselves. Can I just ask, do Basildon reciprocate? Do we license taxes in their area? And if we do, can we double the number?
So the argument that they have, it's a large number of private hire, and obviously we're talking about private hire operators. It's a large number of private hire vehicles and drivers. The legislation as it stands, they have a right to roam, which is why they can get licensed up there. They have an operator's license in that area, and then they have a sister operator license within Essex, so Chelmsford, Southend, Basildon, and they do cross-border hiring, and that's where we've sort of brought in the cross-border hiring from there. The difficulty is obviously for us, it's a legislation change that's needed, which is why we're looking at the lobbying. They are quite right. They have got the right to roam the private hires. Our private hires here could take a booking anywhere in the country. They license operators within their district, but like I said, it's the cross-border hiring to the sister operator licenses over here, within or outside of their areas. So it's similar to us. We license private hire operators within our district, but they can take a booking anywhere in the country. Sorry, Rachel.
I think I've sort of set out in the report, and the trade may also be able to offer a view, but one of the issues is that the licence holders or the potential licence applicants will look to find where they can perhaps more easily get a licence. And often in terms of the private hire drivers, the topographical element of the knowledge test can be a challenge, and I think this particular authority doesn't offer a topographical or doesn't require a topographical knowledge test, and that news spreads like wildfire, so that's why you get an influx of drivers and operators applying for a licence in that area. Clearly, it's known about nationally, and I think it's escalated significantly in the last 12 months. I think 18 months. So that's really a reason for bringing it back to committee, and the basis that we've got to try something.
So, who can change the legislation? Is it primary legislation that comes through Westminster? And are you aware of any ambition for that august body to do anything about this?
So we know that the Local Government Association has been lobbying as well, as have TfL themselves. And I think it will be a continued lobby from councils, MPs, however much we can lobby. It would be a massive change to legislation. We're talking about two acts, one that's 1847, one's that's 1976. They are desperately out of date. They do not take into account modern technology, or how things have changed since those dates. So it would be a very big piece of work for them to do. They did mute it back in 2014. They had some ideas, but since then it's gone quiet. And all that we tend to get is obviously updated guidance, new sort of statutory conditions that doesn't really solve the problem. They brought in the Taxi and Private Hire Vehicle Safeguarding and Road Safety Act in 2022, so that if we have a complaint regarding another local authority's vehicle or driver within our area, when we raise that complaint with the local authority, they have a certain number of days to respond and tell us what action they've taken. So that made it a bit clearer. They understood there was an issue between the cross borders, but that hasn't helped the situation or made any changes to legislation. It's not forthcoming on the horizon that I can see at the moment without more lobbying.
Okay, last question for me then. Given that they have been operating in the borough, has there been an upswing in complaints about the service of drivers that are not licensed by Basildon?
We have received a few complaints in regards to vehicles that are not licensed by us but work for an operator within our area or operators within our area. Those complaints have obviously been passed on to the relevant local authorities for them to investigate, and they will come back with actions that they have taken. So there is a complaints procedure that we follow in regards to out of area vehicles, and when we speak to the person making the complaint.
In summary, Chairman, I'm happy to support the recommendation, but I don't think it's strong enough, to be honest.
Councillor Wingfield.
Thank you. Let's assume that we instruct our MPs to take action and we kind of get rid of cross-border hiring. What impact would that have on our locally licensed drivers? Because I know that there are private hire drivers licensed in Basildon who will work outside the borough. I may not know all the technicalities, but as an example, drivers doing airport runs. Obviously, they're going and collecting outside of our boundaries, potentially dropping off inside the boundary. So, does that count? Would that stop them from being able to do that?
No, so that's the right to roam. So they can take a booking and go anywhere within the country. So they can accept bookings from the borough that's booked directly with them to pick them up, take them to the airport. It could start and end anywhere in the country. The cross-border hiring is so you have an operator that accepts a booking. If they don't have enough vehicles or drivers in that operator licence to fulfil that booking, they can cross-border it to another operator outside of the authority, so in a neighbouring authority, and give that booking to the other operator, but it has to go operator to operator, not operator to driver. It has to go an operator to operator. So they can pass that on to another authority outside of the area. So that's kind of how it works. So, for example, if we had an operator here who's also got an operator's licence, say, in the north somewhere, they would have to show that if they've used sort of their vehicles, they don't have enough vehicles, then they would cross-border that to their sister operator licence and then pass that on to their drivers. So that's the cross-border part of it that we're talking about. But it would not affect drivers that are licensed with Basildon to take a booking anywhere within the country. It's that cross-border part where you only have a few vehicles maybe licensed with Basildon and have a large number licensed with another authority, and you're cross-bordering that across to another operator, but the work is predominantly within Basildon.
Let's hear from the trade. Okay.
Josh, your original question was, if it was to change, how would that affect us? The legislation that was looked at, so if you pick up in your area or you drop off in your area, then you could go anywhere in the country, but what it was happening was, say you did drop in Newcastle or wherever, you couldn't start working in Newcastle. You'd have to come back to Basildon or pick up a job on the way back that would come back to Basildon. So that was the legislation that was originally being looked at, wasn't it, as a change, the right to start a job in the area or drop in the area, and that was the change that they were looking to bring in as part of the LGA's and other people's original points on it. The point of out of area operators, there are currently the National Association is involved in 6 court cases because, as you're aware, the funds that are raised by Rachel for licensing for taxis is ring-fenced and can only be spent on it. You can't really make loads of profit, and some of the councils have been using it to make a large profit and using it for other things within the council, but it's illegal to do so. We have a council on our doorstep that is currently looking at a £500,000 bill for overcharging in the last 7 years and being threatened with massive legal costs, reclaiming all of the fees, so every fee that was paid for licensing on taxis and private hire in the last 7 years would be repaid, and compensation for the period of time that they've done it. So that is the sort of, it's down, there is legislation around and there is legislation that can be acted upon, but one council sees something one way, another council sees it another different way. The legislation is there, it's getting the right people involved to actually take the prosecutions on it. So that is some of the things that are going on. There's some stuff that we're going to bring forward to the forum because we're asking for additional actions to be taken. But as you were saying, I think this field councillor said about it doesn't go far enough. I know that the council that was saying no to cross-border enforcement, that now looks like that they're going to change their mind. And I know they've already put in one bit of sort of rule that they've just brought in, which says that if you want an operator's licence in their area, you basically got to have an office in their area and live in their area. They're bringing that in as a rule, and they are looking at sending a new person to the meetings that you go to for the whole area. Was it only the one council that was outstanding that would not join in on the group enforcement?
It's just trying to sorry, Keith. It's just trying to finalise the last bits of what we're looking at. So it's now sits with a working group, which I'm on, and when I've got an update, I can obviously pass that out to everybody. But at the moment in time, it's a working group that we're on for joint enforcements, and that when I have an outcome for that, then we'll do it. But it will be whichever council is able to sign up for it or wishes to sign up for that joint enforcement. We are also looking at speaking to TfL as well, because it would be the ability for us to be able to stop and ask information of out of area vehicles that we would have authorisation to do, and vice versa. Obviously, if we set an agreement and Chelmsford say agree and our drivers are in Chelmsford, if the authority or whoever's out enforcing happens to see a vehicle, thinks they might be doing something wrong, they have got the authority to stop and talk to them. Whereas currently now they don't have to stop and talk to us, they could just leave the scene, not give us any details.
Okay.
Sorry. So as part of that, you're obviously talking to the people in your positions. You're asking here for us to write to our local MPs. Can we not push this as an Essex-wide thing so it is getting more attention?
So the LGA have lobbied government, and obviously the rest of Essex are the same. I can take it back to the Essex Forum again. We've already lobbied in regards to the recent gambling commissions. So as a group, we do lobby. So I can take that back to them again and look at writing a letter. I can put it on the next forum agenda, which will be in June. So I can put that forward to the members, and hopefully everybody should be there, and I can ask the chairperson on that date. But I am going to see them beforehand, so I can ask that question to make sure it gets put on the agenda for the 5th of June.
Okay. Anyone else before we move on? Councillor Al?
Yes, on page 23, the third paragraph down, there seems to be quite a dispute about people stopping illegally, is it, round stations? What's the story behind that?
So we have some ranks at train stations. Those ranks are specifically there for our Hackney carriage vehicles. So private hire vehicles that are licensed with Basildon and private hire vehicles that are not licensed with Basildon are not allowed to stop on those ranks. Those ranks are for Hackney carriage vehicles only, and Hackney carriage vehicles that are licensed within the borough that rank sits. So our Hackney carriages are the only ones that can stop on the rank and pick up, and obviously drop off. But our Hackney carriages aren't able to stop at a rank, say, in Chelmsford, because they're not licensed with Chelmsford. They will then basically act as a private hire when they're outside of our district. They're not a Hackney carriage. So the issue that we have is, obviously, if you look at Basildon Station, there's not a lot of parking around Basildon Station. So we have a large number of sort of private members of public, as well as sort of private hires that will stop on the rank to like pick up or drop off because they've got a pick up, and that somebody is there. They've normally got it on an app and they can see where it is. So although they're not picking up illegally, they are, because they shouldn't be stopping on a rank. That's a traffic offence. Sorry, it's been a long week. I mean, obviously that's similar for Wickford, and it will be similar for Langdon, and it will be similar for other locations. So that's where a lot of our complaints are coming from, is them stopping on those ranks there. Same with Billericay. We'll go and look at Billericay as well. But everyone that we've looked at has got a pre-booking, so it's not applying for hire, they're just contravening sort of traffic, which is why we're writing out warning letters and issuing and letting the authorities know.
So when I do a private hire from home to the station, the private hire, when I get to the station, the private hire has to find where to drop me, which is not on a marked rank. Is that right? So you have to drop me sort of in the street somewhere because there's all a rank around the...
There is a pick-up drop-off point at Basildon Station, for example, and there is a pick-up drop-off point at Wickford. There is a pick-up drop-off point at Billericay, and there is a pick-up drop-off point at Langdon Station. So what they should be doing is stopping at the pick-up drop-off points and not stopping on the rank. Now, I understand sometimes at peak periods those are busy. So it is trying to find a safe place for them to stop that's not contravening sort of or blocking the Hackney carriages.
Okay, members. I mean, for me, this has been going on for such a long time, and I am concerned that the place in the Midlands, which will remain nameless, you know, people being able to go up there, get a licence, probably not even do the theory test or whatever, come back, use it in Basildon and saying, you know, I've got a licence and well, I think it's completely horrible.
This is the, this gentleman at the end, I forget his name now.
That's
Very
right.
nice gentleman down here now, about what you were saying about the dropping off and picking. The problem is they come out from, well, say Castle Point, which is swamping it at the moment in Basildon. Let's just be honest, we all know where they are. The problem is they don't know the rules and regulations. They go there, bosh, get their ticket, get their licence, get out on the road. And it's down to the proprietors to tell them this, but they don't. They just come and just drive along and they've got no knowledge of how the system works. This is part of the problem as well. They just go along, they just think it's free for all. So.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Okay, so recommendations on page 21 is that members note the contents of the report and steps taken by officers to date. And can we agree that a letter be sent to the borough's members of parliament outlining the issues faced by the cross-border hiring and out-of-area private hire operators seeking support for lobbying of the government for urgent changes to legislation? Or we take a vote, all those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. Item 6, as this is the last meeting of the municipal year for licensing, we thought we would do like a wrap-up of the year. So this is item 6, and is it Alex? It's Rachel.
Alex is my right-hand person as always. So yes, so I just thought it was at the end of the municipal year that we would just give a bit of a run through in terms of activities over the past 12 months, including member decisions, some of the issues that we've dealt with, some of the routine stuff that we do. I wasn't proposing to run through the report in significant detail because some of it is numerical, but I'll perhaps draw attention to members of the work of the licensing team in terms of investigating complaints of breaches of the Licensing Act, including service of late night for refreshment beyond permitted hours, breaches of licensing conditions, CCTV not working and unlicensed activity. It's given a few examples of where action has been or where activity has been undertaken there. It's also provided a general overview of some of the legal matters that have had to be dealt with during the past year. Some of the proposals coming from the Local Government Association, Alex has mentioned about the LGA lobbying for changes to the taxi licensing, but also looking around the ability for locally set fees for licensing act liquor licensing activities, because at the moment that has been that we aren't unable to do that, and there haven't been any changes in those fees since 2005 when the legislation first came in. So clearly the work is still there, and but the fees haven't changed. So there's still an ongoing debate, but in a similar fashion, we've also been waiting for changes in that legislation for some time. In terms of Hackney Carriage and private licensing, again, highlights or lowlights, whichever way you want to view it. 19 drivers have been suspended for failing to adhere to licence conditions. 11 vehicles have been suspended for repair concerns. 6 inspections of private hire operators have been carried out. 10 out-of-hours operations. And officer decision records in relation to vehicle extension requests, which is forming part of the review of licence conditions. The Earn As You Learn pilot, for which a further report will come in, which was supported by members, to try and bring some more drivers through the doors for Basildon. So a further report will be brought back in 2024 on that. That's just be wrapping up now, I think. So we'll be able to provide some feedback. And I think that's really all I wanted to review. I think there's quite a lot of work that goes on in the animal licensing side of things, so it's just really, I say quite a lot of work, there's a lot of work goes on the animal licensing side as well, so it's really just trying to wrap up and show what the level of activity that's gone on during the course of the year, so we're happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from members? Councillor Allen?
Yes, we did discuss some time ago about, page 32, about the wheelchair, second paragraph, about the wheelchair accessible vehicles. There weren't many in the private hire group, but there was quite a number in the Hackney group. But the Hackney, you can't ring up a Hackney carriage to come home to take your wheelchair. You can.
So we've updated, following the report, we've updated, thanks to obviously the Hackney Carriage Association, we've had 3 circuit numbers given to us, which the Hackney Carriage circuits are on, different ones of them on, and that's been added to the list of accessible vehicles on the website. So those 3 numbers for the Hackney Carriage circuit have been added on there, and obviously people can also still call the operators if they so wish, but those numbers have been added on there so that they can be contacted.
Councillor Headley?
Yeah, we've also sent out. A request to the proprietors of, if they wanted to put their telephone numbers on there, because a lot of them are independent proprietors, so they would be personal telephone numbers. We did send it out. We got, I think it was 6 responses, of which 4 didn't want it, and only 2 did. So we struggled with getting a response back. Our aim is to probably go back out again with that question, and obviously look at following the DFT guidance that came out in November. It talks a lot about accessible vehicles, and it talks a lot about sort of private hires and looking at those as well, but does not give you any guidance of what you can do. So when we spoke to the Department of Transport when they were at the conference, I think you might have seen my my question. I asked the question, you're asking about incentives, but what type of incentives are the government or the Department of Transport looking to give for sort of wheelchair accessible or accessible vehicles? Because these accessible vehicles are expensive. So it's not just looking at the councils in regards to sort of fees, because we still have to do the work. You still have to claim, get the costs back for what it costs to run it. But the major cost to the drivers is for the actual vehicle itself. So the questions have been asked about whether there's any sort of grants or funding for these vehicles. So I think the DFT is still looking at more work. We've got some emails that we can sort of email out to them as well. But there is a difficulty for us to be able to get more sort of private hire wheelchair or accessible vehicles. So we will be looking at that, as obviously we looked at from the report in the future. So it is something that we're looking through.
So is it reasonably easier for people requiring a wheelchair accessible vehicle to call from home for it to come to pick up at home?
We hope so, having had the circuit number on there. I believe that we've had even a member of the council that required an assistance vehicle, and we gave them that number, and I believe that they got a taxi through that number. So there is obviously other difficulties, because our vehicles are standard wheelchair vehicles. They look at standard vehicles, so we don't always cover every accessibility need. So for example, a big motorised wheelchair may not meet the weight limit of the ramps that we have for our particular vehicles. So there are some difficulties out there. So I'm not saying that it's perfect or solved, but we are looking to progress forward. And obviously, if there's any complaints in regards to refusals or issues, then for them to come to us with those complaints and we can investigate those complaints.
Councillor Headley.
Thank you, Chair. And referring to the bullet points on page 31, I'm assuming the 19 drivers that were suspended were drivers that have been licensed by this authority?
That's correct.
And some of these are failing to adhere to conditions, regular medicals, failure to have the right insurance. So these drivers that are licensed by this mythical Midlands authority, who checks their insurance and conditions, and are we able to check with that authority that everything is as it would be in this authority area?
So we could email them if we see that if we think that they have a vehicle in our area that we believe might not be roadworthy or is not acting correctly. Like I said, we can do that under the Road Safety Act that came in 22. They do have enforcement people that will come down this direction, and they do work quite closely with people like Chelmsford and Nottlesford, where it is quite prolific currently. And they have sort of touched base to contact other councils within Essex. They do their checks. I don't know fully, their statistics and what they do and what they've got, but they should be doing their checks similar to how we do our checks. But their conditions would be slightly different to ours, as would sort of a neighbouring authority. So when we're looking at joint enforcement, we're not looking to hold up their conditions to ours. What we're looking at is public safety. So we'd be looking at things like, actually, we're trying to look at tyres, make sure they're at legal limits, So if we do spot something, that's what we're intending to say, oh, look, we found this, we want to stop for this. But it's not for us to check that they meet our conditions or that they're meeting their conditions. It's all about public safety and the public safety side of it.
Okay, so the public safety will only be improved or be we would have that assurance that public safety was being served if those vehicle checks and insurances and the medical condition of the driver was in place. So failure to do that, is there any liability attached to a claim that we failed to do due diligence on those aspects of the licence?
Well, I mean, obviously we can check our side. We don't have the authority to check theirs, but we can inquire with them if we have a specific concern on specific drivers or specific vehicles.
I think it should be stronger than an inquiry. I think you should be asking for chapter and verse and proof that they are properly insured, their vehicles are properly maintained, and the drivers are undergoing the same medicals that you require. And if they can't supply that, then I think the licence should be revoked.
Thank you, Councillor, and I appreciate the ambition there, because I don't think we disagree with you, but I think within the legal constraints that we've got, we can only apply our conditions to our drivers and vehicles and operators, and the other authorities can only apply their conditions to their operators. It's the fact that we, as Alex said, if there's a particular danger in terms of a vehicle is clearly not roadworthy, under the proposals for the cross-border enforcement, as it were, that would entitle the officer to suspend the vehicle, but we wouldn't be in a position to do anything more than just deal with roadworthy conditions.
I'm sorry, Chairman, I'm not asking that you impose our conditions on somebody licensed by another authority. What I'm asking is that the conditions applied by that authority are being adhered to. Now, I can't believe they're licensing someone and saying, you don't have to bother about insurance.
I think again we'd need to have some suspicion that they were non-compliant. We're not in a position to just go and question another local authority about particular drivers or vehicles unless we've got grounds to do that. Clearly there's data protection issues, so we have to have regard to the Data Protection Act. So we're not in a position to go and ask to sort of trawl their records or ask for details of enforcement.
You could ask for a blanket assurance that anything licensed by that authority does comply with all the rules and regulations of that authority. And once you've got that in writing from them, if someone is found to be driving without insurance, obviously it's a failure on the driver or his company's part, but also a failure of that authority to carry out due diligence on their own regulations.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you. Councillor Robbins.
It's two things. Wheelchair taxis, wheelchair cabs. I sent a letter to Rachel explaining about one client. The thing that made me really angry was the fact that they won't take the bookings. If they're a proprietor and they've got an office and they've got God knows how many cabs working out of that office, why can't they take a booking? That's the first thing. When drivers were approached, one or two said the job wasn't worth their while. Now they're over operating. Now I understood if you're on a rank, this may not be the case in Basildon, it's the case in London. If you're on a rank and a client walks up to you have to take that job, whether or not it's, as my late husband used to say, a £25p dead legal round the corner, or it's a Heathrow. You've got to take it. If a proprietor answers the phone, then surely he's duty bound to put that booking in for the day. Now that particular person wanted a cab a few days ahead, so surely it could have been worked round. That's my whole argument with it. The wheelchair cabs, disabled people have a right to work. So my feeling is, well, why can't we get the proprietors in and have it out with them? The second thing is, when we're talking about ranks and people parking on ranks, it is absolutely so frustrating. I understand how the drivers feel. So why can't we have enforcement out there issuing them with a ticket? Now, if we haven't got enough enforcement officers, we need some more. Now, the amount of fees that the drivers are paying for their licence, their vehicles and everything else, why can't we have more enforcement officers?
So the enforcement with the FPNs falls down to South Essex Parking Partnership. So they issue the FPNs. There is an issue currently in regards to the rank at the rear of Basildon. And there is an issue with that rank at the back of Basildon in regards to South Essex Parking Partnership enforcing it, and it's between sort of Essex County Council and South Essex Parking Partnership. So that's what we're looking at. The rank at the back of Basildon Station, Trafford House. Yeah, so that's where that issue sits currently with that one, because that's the biggest issue, the biggest one that's got the problems on it. So a lot of the ranks, so for example the one at Wickford, that's the station rank. So that's again not us. I was out there a couple of weeks back and moving on members of the public, but I don't have the authority to issue them with FPNs. But there was only two, right at the far end, not blocking the rank, and I stood there for an hour, and that was only two that came in there, but they were moved on straight away by myself, and I stood there for an hour. I went looking for Ubers, I went looking for, out of area vehicles. Most of the members of the public were parking and coming round and parking on that road. It was actually quite busy. We've done the same when we go out in the evenings and we do late night enforcement. So we're out at 10, 11, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. We will go out to the ranks as well and go and look and see for members of the public and stuff, and for private hire vehicles on there. But we have approached South Essex Parking Partnership about FPNs and issuing tickets at the back there. And we did request information to how many tickets they've issued on the ranks within the Basildon area as well. So it is something that is being worked on, but when we do go out and look at ranks, and we do stop. We do go talk to private hire operators, and we do go talk to members of the public as well when we're there.
Okay.
So with respect to the bookings of wheelchair cabs, what's the situation with that now?
So obviously we've asked for further information in regards to that complaint, if we're looking at the specific complaint, because what we were looking at is who said what, so that we can talk to those operators
Yeah.
and find out what's happening and why it wasn't booked. And, you know, obviously, like yourself, it was concerning in regards to, you know, certain wording that was in there. So it is being investigated into, and we will go back to the complainant. I understand that he's been in contact with a cab firm, and one of our members of the public, or one of our members of the team, sort of gave them that information and who to speak to, because we've obviously spoken to people previously and tried to help out and put them in contact with right people.
So am I right in thinking that one's being investigated at the moment?
It's been investigated currently, so I don't really want to talk too much about it, because I've only just got some details of who it is and what they are.
You gave me 3 numbers at the last meeting, which are the 3 numbers that I gave to that chap, and not one of those was available. That's it.
Those are the circuit numbers that I gave you
Yeah.
at the last one. So again, that's the Hackney Carriage Association that's sat behind you, that have 52 vehicles on there. So that might be a good question for the trade that's sitting behind you at the moment.
Gone off again.
Go on.
Right, sorry. We previously discussed with yourselves, and we did a mystery shopping exercise for wheelchair accessible vehicles. I think there was 2 points. It was across the mystery shopping that weren't covered. One was phoning circuits and asking them for wheelchair accessible vehicles, and the other one was we didn't have anybody with guide dogs to be done. Right? Did we? What was the one we didn't have then? There was one part we didn't have, another part. Did we? Check that report again then. I don't think you did the circuits, did you? You didn't phone the circuits. You just went on the ranks and.
Sorry, as far they did make phone calls for bookings. They did also go to the ranks as well. I'd need to check back and see if it was circuits that were also called, but I do know that the operators were called as well.
Sorry, carry on. I understand some of the numbers we've given you are the smaller Hackney Carriage only circuits. Right. One of those, the one at Langdon, I think you've got the number there.
Base.
No,
Direct.
was it?
Base and direct. I'm sure of them.
Sorry, I don't know what numbers are.
Langdon.
It was, yeah. So, as a point of view, and you know, I've been in the office and trying to get the bookings and get things sorted.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. The drivers are independent. They work when they want to work. To be honest, I did 2 hours on Monday, and I've done 5 hours today, and I've not worked in between. Now, I'm not wheelchair accessible. I was, but I'm not. It's just like you've got other things going on. It's when you work. Now, if you're sitting there as a controller trying to control, and I'm not trying to make excuses for the circuits, you don't know who is going to be out the next day. You don't know who's going to be out in a week's time. Right? You might have 1 or 2 drivers that are regulars, but because they are regulars, they've got regular bookings already, and so when you try to get an extra, somebody phones up and tries to get the extra booking, it's a bit hard to do. So there are circumstances where I understand where the controller or the person on the phone will actually say, sorry, I don't have one, because they may have only 1 out that day and they've already got 5 bookings. It might be that he doesn't know he's already got 3 drivers on holiday that week. He just doesn't know what he's going to have on additional and the other ones coming in.
Choice
So-
of being self-employed, can
Yeah, and that is the thing. The trade is full of self-employed for its goods and bads, but that is one of the issues. I say, but the issue that I would go back to is you need to do the mystery shopping again, because I think there was, that was pre-pandemic, wasn't it? And we've had a number of years, obviously, and it needs to come back in.
So we have approached the Disability Forum as well, and we've spoken to them about doing updated mystery shopping, so that is already in hand for that.
Okay, everyone? Anyone else? No? Okay, well, recommendation on page 29 is just to note contents of the report. Thank you to officers and for the end of the municipal year. And thank you to members as well.